Let's go ahead and get into it. I really enjoyed the first video. Makes really good videos, and I was very surprised. And this one's 53 minutes. How long was the first one? 40. Oh, so this video might be a little long. 53 minutes. Now, I don't know like if y'all liked when I talked less, but forget that. Let's get into it. Oh, that is bright.
Today's video is brought to you by Audible. There are many reasons why Audible is a great service, but most of all, it can save you a lot on the newest 40K audiobooks. You can get a free audiobook of your choice plus 2 Audible originals using my link. Please be sure to check it out at audible.com/Luton. At the end of the video, I'll cover some audiobook choices that I think you should give a listen to.
Okay. If I ever get the chance, I'll probably get into Audible and listen to some Warhammer books when I get the money. No, I am perfectly fine with all that. I don't need any banners or logos or anything like that. Thank you. I mean, I know you're probably a bot or a scammer or something, but I'm good. God, it sucks to be a small streamer.
Of insane weapons and powerful tools in the galaxy of the 41st millennium. However, within that I want to note that given just how many weapons are completely bonkers in the dark and far future, it seems likely this series will run on, and if you want to see that happen, hit the like as always. As I say, the better a video does, the more I will make. As with the last time, I will just note briefly that for the purposes of these videos, I am considering a weapon to be anything that is simply destructive to an enemy, which can mean simply being powerfully advantageous to its user, not necessarily a literal and physically offensive object, device, or infantry weapon. It could simply be a concept or belief system. For example, as we learned last time with the corrupting nature of chaos, which was also illustrated in the Defense of Riser video, just how insidious and problematic chaos corruption can be, and that if nothing else it creates weakness within the enemy. This is why in the past many weapons were focused on wounding, not killing an enemy, so that it would burden your opposition with casualties. And the key element is that whatever it is, it enables destruction. Lastly, I will say that you guys have made plenty of good suggestions last time around for more choices to cover. There is very obviously a huge wealth of weapons and different processes that rise to a level of being insanely powerful, so if it's not featured here, don't worry, I may well already be writing it up for the 3rd installment, but you'll need to join me next time around to find out if it's featured. Firstly today, an Imperial weapon, and within the realms of some of the weapons we've been talking about, this may appear on the face of it to be something of a controversial choice, as I have selected the Astra Militarum's Death Strike missiles. Now you may be saying, what? Just a missile? How is that insane or crazy and powerful? Well, hear me out. I would admit that Death Strike missiles will probably not stand out immediately as a crazy or a powerful weapon. However, it does have a solid dose of insanity about it, and we'll come to why shortly. The first great thing about Death Strikes is quite crudely that it has a truly epic name. When you're launching Death Strike missiles, you really know what you're going to be getting when you call these guys in. The next reason for me is that the Imperial Guard don't catch many breaks, so for them having some awesome firepower in terms of long-range, very powerful ordnance is no doubt appreciated by those in the trenches. Lastly, and also probably most importantly, the reason I chose the Death Strike missiles is that the weapon is very representative of the upside-down, apathetic attitude towards human losses within the Imperium. The Death Strike is not a complex weapon. It has no temporal black hole firing archaeotech functionality, it's not harboring some latent AI or able to extinguish stars. It's simply a single huge intercontinental ballistic missile mounted on the body of an Imperial Guard Chimera to use as a mobile launching platform. It's pretty low tech.
So basically big ass missiles and like nukes and stuff like that, which isn't that bad. You know, last video he was talking about some crazy ass weapons, and he was talking about chaos, Like, I can see how, like, for, like, like the demons and stuff and the warp and everything, how chaos is a weapon to them, You get infected, and it sucks for fucking humans and stuff, because we really don't even have to do anything to get infected by chaos. And once that happens, I mean, it's crazy. It's like, I didn't even think of it like that. It's mind blowing. But let's continue the video, because, like I said, this is a long one. A long one.
In fact, it's barely different than what we have now in the 21st century. You don't need a huge team to operate it because it's just a huge missile mounted on a transport. Once it's fired, the operators of said launch vehicles are going to either turn around and hightail it back for rearming or jump out and get into the fight. Either way though, they're going to be very soft targets for your enemy once they've delivered their payload, but considering they're likely to be quite likely out of sight of the action, that's probably a very minor consideration in the grand scheme of things. Regardless, who really cares about Johnny Guardsman driving his tank? We want to know more about Commissar Notley overviewing his gigantic barrage of Death Strike missiles raining down on the waves of heretics and Xenos who dared to invade Imperial territory. Now, you might still be thinking, well, that doesn't seem very insane. On the face of it, I'd agree. However, its functionality and even its lethality is not what I love about the Death Strike. Yes, it can fire over absolutely massive distances, which makes sense as it's basically just a rocket with an immensely powerful warhead, but this is where we need to come to one of my favourite parts of the Imperium, its comically bleak levels of apathetic bureaucracy. Just what I mean by this is that there will generally speaking be minimal attention paid to the thousands of guardsmen being turned into meat paste by alien horrors. There may well be some forms filled out, but that's about it. Yet the Death Strike is considered to be such a powerful weapon that it requires all manner.
Look, if I was part of the Imperium, and I was a low man, like like a regular guard, like Tyranid, I wouldn't be scared of them. Fuck them fucking alien fucking things. Everyone else though? Everyone else in this universe? I'd be shitting bricks. What? No, like no. Couldn't do it. I'd be like, can I go back over here and fight these giant looking bugs, alien, like the movie Aliens, like guys, like take me back over there, take me back to that planet. Like, I'm fine with that, like totally fine. These other guys, you see the weapons they have, can't make me do it, not at all.
Of special authorization from the Militarum to be deployed, and because the administrative process required to make literal craters out of its enemies, leaving little if any remains, is in fact considerable, I always like to imagine an Adeptus Administratum logistics representative asking an officer at some forward base on a besieged planet, "Are you really sure those death strikes are needed, sir? Because I'm going to have to fill out a whole set of new forms for you," plus asking the Mechanicus and Ecclesiarchy to arrange their whole series of ceremonies. The insane part of a Death Strike is less what it does and more the hoops that have to be jumped through just for them to be deployed. Death Strikes can be outfitted with a whole range of payloads, from plasma to biological, even vortex tipped. So like many powerful weapons in the Imperium, they can end up becoming viewed in many respects as some kind of holy weapon. Consequently, their authorization and deployment is tied up by red tape and weighed down under paperwork and ceremonial process. For something more advanced like a Baneblade or a Titan, you could perhaps forgive such long-form procedures. But for the Death Strike, come on Imperium, to even get Death Strike missiles to a battlefield requires an extensive process before they can be rolled out, which stands in stark contrast to, say, battalions of Imperial Guard, where instead of having to check off all the boxes before moving on to scented oil ceremonies, you're more likely to be asked, "Really, sir? Are you sure you only want 50,000 guardsmen? Because, we can give you another 100,000 men if you really need it. It's not a problem. I don't know why you wouldn't take those extra guardsmen. They're just waiting to be thrown against the enemy, so rubber stamp it and you're good to go." The Death Strike missiles are comically perfect metaphor for much of the Imperium for me, because they sit on this farcical line between being powerful and very pertinent tools for the Imperial Guard, but are also then completely hamstrung by bureaucracy, making them not exactly practical. Meanwhile, thousands of guardsmen are being literally shredded in real time by their enemies, but hey, is the Imperium, so you can always deploy more guardsmen. A single missile, on the other hand, turned out by Imperial Factorums. Now hold on, that quite obviously needs considerably more scented oils and ecclesiastical readings before we can even get to thinking about rolling them out from the armory. Anything else would just be complete blasphemy. Of course, when the Death Strike does bring its firepower to the battlefield, it can be truly apocalyptic, razing cities, bunkers, Xenos hordes, traitors, or insurgent encampments. They could be used defensively by Imperials upon besieged worlds, or offensively in supporting an assaulting force launched ahead of infantry to help secure strategic territory and resources. Their range and power is so vast that their targets are likely not even going to be aware an enemy force may be headed their way before they suffer catastrophic casualties as if struck down by the very hand of the Emperor. Judgment rained down upon them in fiery destruction by the Death Strike missile. Hoping though, of course, that they've managed to even be deployed before the majority of the Imperial forces are obliterated. But now we return to...
I'm still trying to figure out how do you deal with weapons that can shoot black holes and stuff.
And comparative to my first choice, this one is genuinely controversial, and that will become clear why. But it also ignites one of my worst fears in the form of yet another attack of the 40K unpronounceables because of their use of the odd AE symbol. I am fairly past the point of caring now when it comes to 40K pronunciations. I'm just done with it because...
Hold on a second. My IG and Discord is all in my links on my channel and on my Twitch channel, and for YouTube, Instagram, all my social media, Discord are on my channel, and a lot of them are in the description. So yeah, if you want to ever hit me up or even play games with me, there you go.
Some of the names of characters of things start to feel ever more like being weird just for the sake of it. I'm just going with what appears the easiest, aonic. And that's what I'm going with, and that's how I will always say that. The reason being, I did find another use of this in 40K, and it was also to pronounce the word ether. Anyway, what is this strange Necron object and what does it do? Well, first, and I know how you all love this, I have a solid preamble to get through because I need to note fairly importantly that this is a very questionable object in the sense of, is it actually even being a thing or not? So trust me, we do need to know a little bit more about the background of its emergence before I even describe what it is. However, I did decide...
Well, we're talking more about the Necrons?
If you cannot be bothered to hear me talking about how this thing came to be, I have timestamped this video, so you can either check in the timeline below the video or in the notes, and skip over to the next section. The aonic orb has never had an official model created for it for starters. Now, for many of you, that may not matter.
I'm sorry, by the way. I think it's catching because I'm catching the outside noise because I'm close. My house is close to a main road, so, and I can hear the cars passing by. I can try to fix that. Try that, I guess. I have no clue, but let's get back into the video.
There are of course plenty of other things within the background of 40K that have no actual model, but as I said, it's tricky to really know if this Necron artifact is actually considered a genuine thing or if it was just a flight of fancy as an idea, because it also doesn't really appear in any narrative material either. It was basically more of a concept, but it was a little more than that, as I will explain. Personally, I enjoy the often very confusing and chaotic nature of 40K. It's something that feels like an unending puzzle with leads chasing off in different directions. It can be very contradictory at times, where all you can do is try to discern your best guess as to just how things really are. That's actually an intentional part of the design of 40K as well, but I actually find this to be quite refreshing. There are a great deal as well of peripheral details, often very vague at the best of times, and as I've said before, my overall view is that how true or untrue something is depends mostly on how collectively well defined it is. It's much more about that than it is somebody simply just stating that a thing occurred or existed, and this is why, despite in some of the newer books, new material dropping potentially very big revelations, I'm very wary about believing it being set in stone, because you just hear it from one person, and when you're in an entire galaxy and all you have is one person's account, how much do you trust it? What's their motivation? What's their history, their overall goals? What's their faction? My overall methodology is that within 40K, the more discussed and the more documented something is, again, perhaps cross-factionally as well, the more likely you can consider it to be objectively true. But even then, there's a lot of room for doubt. What if something is widely documented in a faction, but its origins were distorted to deliberately sow confusion, thus projecting or distorting events outside of our field of view? So it is a complex and troubling thing, but it is also part of 40K nonetheless. And as much as we might like things to be very neat and tidy, all squared away with proper labels and dates and above all certainty, it just doesn't work that way in 40K. And I know that bothers some people, but it is simply how it is. Now specifically when it comes to the aonic orb, I want to be absolutely clear. This was never something included in an official 40K book. So you're probably by now already gathering wood to start lighting the inquisitional fires at my feet. But hold on, although it was...
I mean, but it makes sense, you know?
The aonic orb was displayed on the Specialist Games site run by Games Workshop. What the hell is that? Well, it doesn't exist anymore. But you see, quite a few years ago, Games Workshop had a lot of its older material for spin-off games like Necromunda, Battlefleet Gothic, and Epic. In fact, I seem to remember that when Necromunda stopped being officially supported, Games Workshop actually had the whole rulebook freely available to download. But this site also had other oddities and sort of house rules to add interest and flavour to these spin-off titles. Even though they weren't being officially supported, they wanted to sort of add something, I guess, for the community back then. So that's really what this Specialist Games site was, and I believe it was most prominently active in the early 2000s up to about 2006, but I'll admit it's not something I paid super close attention to, so maybe somebody can tell differently or I'm just wrong, but that was my understanding. Either way, the Specialist Games site definitely had...
Okay. So I didn't know they had like spin-offs and stuff. That's pretty, like, they did other stuff like before this? Or like during the same time? I mean, going back and looking at that, I mean, you can see it has like a lot of like just like look at the weapons and stuff. It looks very similar to Warhammer. I don't know what I'm talking about, but it looks cool. I mean, it doesn't look as cool as Warhammer. Like Warhammer definitely looks way cooler than this, but this looks like very like 80s.
Interest and flavour to these spin-off titles. Even though they weren't being officially supported, they wanted to sort of add something, I guess, for the community back then. So that's really what this Specialist Games site was, and I believe it was most prominently active in the early 2000s up to about 2006, but I'll admit it's not something I paid super close attention to, so maybe somebody can tell differently or I'm just wrong, but that was my understanding. Either way, the Specialist Games site definitely had some sort of connection to what we would be considered official material because it was part of Games Workshop's online presence at the time, but I would judge it to be basically anyone's individual call as to whether you would actually consider it being truly a part of what we would ostensibly define as the actual 40K verse. It would of course close when things were steadily revamped. Later, some games like Necromunda of course relaunched as completely refreshed products. However, games like Epic and Battlefleet Gothic continued to not have new tabletop versions of those games released, but it is my fairly confident guesstimation that it is fairly inevitable they will do, but just so far not yet. Now, although no longer officially supported by Games Workshop, there was still a solid group of people who wanted to enjoy and still have access to these unsupported titles. And this is where you see websites providing unofficial but community accepted army lists for units and so on, to give everybody a stable field to work off of. What I want to note is that although they are unofficial, these sources are usually confined to just doing the rules and unit stats. They're not just creating random background details. You know, this can occur, but most of the time that's not what it is. It's just about rules and stats. And I wanted to clarify that because in terms of the aonic orb, as I noted earlier, it had no official model produced or official background produced. But even though it never had a specific model created for it, it did originate from the Specialist Games site produced by GW. Now, I know this was a lot of preamble blur, but I'm sorry for that. But it is important.
It's fine. It is fine.
The Necron aonic orb is a very unusual oddity. It's sort sort of official and sort of unofficial. It hasn't been officially, and I'll say it, retconned, because it originated from a time when Games Workshop were trying to provide extra detail for specialist game communities. Nothing has since overwritten or superseded it, but if you were to look at the original descriptions of it now, you'd be forgiven for thinking it was a completely unofficial thing. In fact, that's even what I thought when I first was reading about this. Now, I can't imagine we'll see something like this happen again, because it's such a weird, specific oddity happening toward the retirement of one title, and before things were even getting formalized in terms of just what material was provided where, really. It was very scrappy and weird, but this kind of extra game support did set up for supplements that would follow on right through to now where we are, where we're seeing things like Psychic Awakening in 40K providing individual units to accompany the specific narratives. Maybe I could have just skipped all of that and just said it's like how Psychic Awakening was, and how they had specific units with that, but for the old Epic game system, and then you wouldn't have had to listen to me ramble through it all. Oh well. So, what is the Aonic Orb? It was created long ago as an expression of ultimate power. The Aonic Orb is the epitome of Necron technology and a testament to the might of the Catan. In essence, the orb is a fragment of a star contained within a necrodermis sphere, stabilized by the awesome power of Necron magnetic technology. This containment system gives the orb its primary power source. The orb itself is mounted on a massive skimming platform that gives the orb its mobility. Aonic orbs were rare even at the zenith of the Necron's empire, and the Aonic Orb is probably the rarest Necron weapon in the current period of the galaxy. Their rarity is in part due to the fact that they are no longer able to be created by the Necron, because in order to do so, a Catan was required to destroy an entire star to shackle the power of the star for the...
So now you're telling me, right? You're telling me, like we learned from the last video, the Necrons have some pretty powerful weapons, like that can basically wipe out solar systems. Now you're telling me they have like one of the rarest things with this orb in the universe? I absolutely love the Necrons. I don't keep saying that. I'm sorry. They're my favorite faction so far. Like, oh my god. But it's kind of ridiculous, man. They're kind of ridiculous. I mean, they probably don't play like this on the tabletop, but if you're just talking about like the lore and stuff, like, oh, okay.
Used by the Necron. Its power is on a scale that would be described as titanic weaponry, because when one is observed by a Necron army, it's almost always to eliminate enemy titans. Although it is unlikely an enemy of the Necron have ever actually seen an Aonic Orb, because they would have no idea of what was about to come their way, and know that if they did see one, immediate and urgent...
Hold on, I'll be right back. I totally forgot to eat when I got up. I, brushed my teeth, took a shower, did all that, and started editing a video. And after that, I hopped right on stream. So I'm kind of starving right now, Hold on, just a second. Alright, I'm back. Now, YouTube, you don't have to worry about this. But Twitch, I'm gonna have to eat real quick, okay? Movie magic. Let's actually get back into this. Excuse me.
Fleeing should be the best course of action. In some respects, the Aonic Orb is quite simple. It's this star fragment constrained within the necrodermis shielding, unleashing the power of solar flares against its enemy. And this is achieved by adjustment of its containment field surrounding the star fragment. It focuses a concentrated plume of plasma generated by the stellar fragment into a high velocity bolt. It's so powerful that the plasma suffers no loss of heat or velocity, and horrifically, this allows the Necrons to direct a plasma beam of focused solar energy. It's able to cut through virtually virtually any material without resistance. Titans have reported as having suffered catastrophic damage when engaged by Necron aonic orbs, and despite having the most powerful shielding in the Imperium, they were unable to withstand the sheer power of a focused stellar beam. However, the weapon is not without its limitations. Forming the containment beam is so energy intensive that the orb requires significant periods of time to recover from firing. To that end, the aonic beam has
that's good.
that is weaker but similar in concept to this solar flare, and it's known as a solar burst. It is a much weaker containment beam used to guide a mass of plasma to a target, which results in the plasma losing heat at an incredible rate. So by the time it reaches its target, its effects, while powerful, are not comparable to the main solar flare beam. Its range is considerably more limited, but despite this, the explosive force and radiation unleashed upon its targets is still sufficient to cause havoc among its victims. The Necron and Eldar have dabbled in some of the most end-of-days weaponry, and the Aonic Orb is no exception.
You see what I mean? I do not want to fight some of these factions. Like, just give me the bugs, man. Just give me the bugs, like, this.
The Necron were able to shatter the Catan, being so powerful that they could literally distort causality, and the Necron, in defeating them, unleashed all manner of strange effects. It seems in fact that the Necron have a very far and much deeper understanding of the galaxy and the forces at play than many would consider them capable of, or hope they were capable of, and that for their appearance as ghoulish metallic legions of destruction, they are in some respects far more refined and cautious in their curating of the precise forces at work in the galaxy. To this end, they have what are known as the Cryptex, who specialize in the highly advanced fields of technology and knowledge. Among them are also what are known as chronomancers, who have a deep understanding of time, causality, and even able to bend time to their will. The overall point here is that much of what the Necron find themselves focused on bears little consideration for mortal races, but they do understand that there are some powers so dangerous that even they must utilize caution and restraint, lest they unleash powers or chains of events so powerful that nothing can contain them, leading to the annihilation of all things. It appears likely that it was their ability to wield powers strong enough to enable the destruction of the Catan that brought them to this realization. But the bottom line is that the Aonic Orb probably does lean slightly more toward unofficial than official, and I could have chosen not to include it, except for one reason, which is that it does fit completely within the sphere of what we know the Necron to be capable of and what we would expect the Necron to deploy to the battlefield. It's a very well crafted device in terms of fitting within the background, and in some ways it's actually not even as powerful as some of their other technology. I mean, please do remember that one of the Necron's fully official weapons was basically a Death Star mobile tomb world armed with Gauss weapons that could literally scorch, disintegrate, and turn to sterile ash the surface of any planet it encountered. Those vast platforms also had powerful gravitic wave energy which could tear apart enemy ships, as well as teleportation devices able to transport asteroids and other material inside ships, destroying them from the inside out. So the Necrons have some astonishingly powerful technology. It's a weapon of the living metal undead who have literally destroyed gods and
It's astonishing. I think that's... Oh, man. These weapons are fucking ridiculous, man. Like... And it can somewhat control time? Come on, man. They're taking like Terminator stuff like to a whole new level. Like, I can clearly tell like these guys were based off of Terminator. That's probably one reason I really like them. You can tell that there's some Terminator influence in it. And I don't know about you, I love the Terminator. Well, most of the movie. I like the first one and the second one like everybody else, and I mean, besides that, I mean, a couple of the movies were okay, but anyways, yeah, let's get back on this. Like, Jesus, these guys are kind of scary.
Shackled them to their whim, who are capable of destroying entire solar systems seemingly at their will. So an Aonic Orb is well within the reasonable grasp of their technology, plus their rarity means that based on how I interpret 40K lore, it could be a real thing, or it could just be a mythical thing, misinterpreted by the few surviving guardsmen of a truly apocalyptic battle on some distant planet, passed down through word of mouth, and has become muddled and exaggerated over time. So who can really say? So consider
I
how
didn't think about
powerful
that.
much of Necron technology is before writing off the Aonic Orb. I guess the last thing I'll say is quite simply, is the Aonic Orb real or not? That all depends on if you trust the drunken late night reminiscent ramblings of Sergeant Tough Bastard of the Imperial 183rd, or any other random unstable individuals who are rambling and talking to themselves, somehow able to have survived and just may or may not have witnessed an Aonic Orb in action.
So basically, you got to take it with a grain of salt. But in this universe, like, it might be possible, like, highly likely in this universe. So, I mean, they may be drunken fools, but come on now.
Orcs are often wildly underestimated for the danger they present to the galaxy and to the Imperium, and orcs when left unchecked can quickly rise to becoming unstoppable. Once they gain momentum in a warg, it can take massive resources to prevent them from ravaging entire systems like a plague of insects. It's worth remembering that at one point they stood on the cusp of destroying the Imperium in what was known as the War of the Beast in the middle of M32, and this was a costly and devastating campaign that in some ways was worse than that of the Heresy. This time was one of the first instances the Imperium would experience what are known as Orc attack moons. During another battle against the Xenos, who are known as the Chromes, Astartes here were noticing a lot of strange gravity changes and disturbing geological events, and as reinforcements were sent to assist, they soon realised that the cause of these disturbances were in fact a strange Orc planetoid that had appeared in orbit around the world, and quickly they would engage and destroy much of the reinforcing Imperials that were there. Stranger though still was it appeared to be phasing in and out of material space. As it became more stable, hordes of orcs began to appear, slaughtering whatever was left of the Imperials, and a broken message was sent out to the Imperium that it was facing a threat the likes of which it had never seen before. It's worth noting that at the end of this battle, the majority of the Imperial 5th chapter had been exterminated by these events. It soon became clear that what were being now designated as Orc attack moons were being more commonly seen. They left devastation wherever they appeared and deployed massive waves of orcs upon planets that they came into the orbit of. The situation became worse and worse, and billions perished. The story of the War of the Beast is long and contains many other interesting incidents like the Proletarian Crusade that I have mentioned previously. It also involves the reappearance and subsequent last appearance of the Primarch Vulcan of the Salamanders. He is assumed by many to be dead, but given he is a perpetual, the Salamanders still hunt for him to this day. But what about these attack moons? Well, they were devastating weapons seen only in the most frenzied and sprawling of orc wargs. They are basically battle planetoids, extremely powerful in both armament and capability. The orcs, you should know, are the strange creation of the ancient race known as the Old Ones, and like many races in the galaxy that are suspected to originate from the Old Ones' planetary seeding, they have curious instinctive abilities when it comes to technology. So orcs are capable of simply hammering different tech together, and somehow it just miraculously works. This can extend to them constructing machines that even defy the laws of physics, but simply because of their enthusiasm, orcs can seemingly will things to work. In some respects, these traits bear something of a similarity to the race known as the Jakaro. But whereas the Jakaro tend to kind of just improve existing things, orcs will in fact construct titans from scrap, which by all visual appearance should simply fall apart. Yet often they are equally as tough as their Mechanicus Titanic counterparts. Orcs will often attack worlds by landing in what are known as rocks. And they are called rocks because they're basically big rocks, or asteroids, that orc mech boys have hollowed out and then fitted with plasma engines and all manner of other bashed together tech, likely just whatever was available. However, orc rocks are usually not capable of warp travel, and they just drift around, and then when they're near enough to a world, they'll fire up their engines and smash into a planet, causing massive damage and then unleashing hordes of orcs into a world, likely that they will then never be rid of them. Attack moons, in a simpler sense, are basically scaled up rocks. This is not dissimilar to a lot of orc tech. They often will find something small kind of work works, and then they simply scale it up bigger and bigger, because if it works well already, then it's going to work well when it's bigger. And quite honestly, most of the time this isn't actually too far away from what other races do with their tech too, including humanity and the Imperium. So one of the primary things that's different about Orc attack moons is that they're capable of FTL travel. This is why they appear to often phase in and out of material space. But unlike most FTL, they're not using the warp. The Orcs somehow create what the Mechanicus believe to be a subspace corridor, a dimensional space in between the warp and real space. And we could speculate they're using whatever dimensional space the Eldar webway is contained within, considering that this was created in and around the time of the Old Ones, and given the Orcs' believed origins also have the connection. This travel seems typically Orcy in nature, in that it is not exactly smooth, and there is this strange period of phasing in and out of real space accompanied by these very powerful gravity forces that will affect nearby planets. However, this is no negative for the Orcs. If anything, it's beneficial, as it will often cause geological and environmental chaos on a planet, meaning that by the time the Orcs are ready to invade the world, it's far less likely to be prepared, if not already in a state of total disruption. But aside from these huge problems created for a planet by simply phasing in and out of real space so close to it that it destroys the balance of a world, causing apocalyptic environmental disruption, they also boast other terrifying weapons. Powerful beam emitters that can tear a planet apart, as well as a void shielding apparently more powerful than even Imperial battleships. Their most feared weapon, though, is the legendary gravitic whip. This was described as being a gravity weapon that appeared visually as a green snake-like whip of energy surrounding an attack moon that would strike against any target the Orcs focused on, and the power unleashed was so great it would near enough shear anything in two as instantly as the gravity lash hit, or that it would then wrap around it so that the seismic crushing power would just shred whatever object it had caught upon. It's believed that this power came from the mass of Orc energy buried somewhere.
You know what I'm really getting from all this and all these insane weapons? A lot of the people in the factions in this universe, in a way, they are quite nice and sane, right? Because these guys have some crazy weapons that if they're fucking like out of their fucking mind, this universe would be over so fucking quick. Like, we think about like on our planet, like as the human race, we're we're not the best. We always have war with each other and everything, blowing stuff up, but we really don't use the big stuff. Like, you don't see like nukes being like thrown around like candy around here. Like, I mean, yes, people, we have dropped a few nukes, but that's not the first thing we go to. And it's kind of like the same way in this universe, but on a much bigger scale. Fucking solar systems and stuff that can be destroyed, allegedly. Like, they're quite, these guys are quite nice. Like, they could be like, just fuck everyone and everything. This nuke a whole fucking solar system all the fucking time. But they know better. They have some restraint. They hold back. That's nice. I'm still scared of this universe. I would not want to live in it.
Within its hollowed centre, likely a scaled-up version of the same mysterious energies that power Orc Titanic battle mechs. The gravity whip is extremely feared by the Imperial fleet commanders, as they have little to no defence against its power. Entire battle fleets could near enough be destroyed with one pass from the gravity whip, tearing them apart like matchsticks. The only saving grace was the high amount of power needed to activate the fearsome weapon, and this gave Imperial commanders some room for manoeuvre and planned engagements in between its assaults. A Attack moons themselves are not exactly vessels in the sense of them moving like ships. They're more like entry-exit points for the orcs to travel through this subspace realm, I suppose, similarly to the Necron's
And I'm pretty sure there probably are some crazy assholes in this universe who
that can deploy then
probably blew up a few solar systems and definitely a lot of planets.
Using the same gravitic powers used to create the original attack moons, Orc are able to transport also large sections of conquered planets up to the attack moon, thereby growing it in size and structure. This process uncovered the fact that these attack moons were somewhat akin to a prototype for the Orc known as the Beast to launch a perfected much larger attack planetoid, using in fact the world of Ullanor Prime itself as one gigantic battle station. And the Orcs had planned to in fact destroy Terra itself with this. Thankfully, as noted under the leadership of Vulcan, this was prevented and the Orc known as the Beast was slain. However, the Mechanicus would actually study and transport the world of Ullanor Prime to a new location, and although it is unknown to the Imperium commonly, this world would later become known as the fabled Imperial planet of Armageddon. Now, I debated including Exterminatus because it's such an extremely obvious choice. However, the prospect of having years of comments saying why no Exterminatus was too much for me to mentally cope with. So Exterminatus is, as the name suggests, an order requiring the complete eradication of all life on a planet to reduce perhaps once vibrant places of culture, construction, life and beauty to barren, wasted rock. It's certainly no small thing and will not be enacted without usually a very good reason. Exterminatus has been used to cleanse planets rightfully owned by mankind in the face of unrecoverable and planet-wide heresy, mutation or disease that has spread like a wildfire past the point of return, to stop warp rifts opening or when they have already become too severe. It is also deployed when Xenos are so entrenched into a planet that it is considered too costly to recover. This is usually not especially common because the disposable manpower the Imperium has available is usually more than enough to recover a world. However, if a planet had little importance, it may be easier to Exterminatus a planet than allow an enemy to use a lost world as a springboard to other worlds in a system. Exterminatus will also be used to obliterate worlds which are lost in other ways. For example, during the period known as the Great Scouring, after the Horus Heresy, where loyalist forces of the Imperium sought to scour the galaxy of traitors and heretics, many worlds of former Astartes legions were subject to Exterminatus to purge the memory of them, erase all trace of them ever having existed forevermore. Not to mention the fact that after the heresy, many worlds were entirely consumed by corruption, as I've discussed a lot recently, and any attempt to recover them would have been impossible if just not prohibitively costly at a time when severe damage had already been dealt to the forces of the Emperor. In essence, they were written off and just destroyed. There are several core methods by which the Imperium will deliver Exterminatus to a world. The most standard is orbital bombardment, and this is where Imperial warships will deploy heavy bombardment upon a planet until it is all but a barren wasteland devoid of any population or biological matter. It is also a fairly vague term and could apply to things like atmospheric incineration as well, or dropping many thermonuclear missiles upon a planet with obvious consequences. One of the more dramatic and well-known methods is the aforementioned atmospheric incineration. This is the visually devastating method of Exterminatus, as well as being an incredibly fast method of annihilating a world. A device deploying nucleonic fire, raw plasma, or a bomb of extreme radioactivity is dropped to scour the surface of a world. Whichever of these are deployed, they will be of a scale so powerful that surface rock may be melted into a liquid state, organic matter be completely obliterated, vaporized, or just breaks down into radioactive sludge. Usually this is then accompanied by an atmospheric burn-off, leaving ultimately no living matter on the world. Some worlds may have below-ground facilities or Xenos threats there, and this is where a two-stage system will be deployed to eradicate both the surface and below-ground elements of life. Sometimes these torpedoes can be so powerful that the shockwave can in fact destabilize a planet and break it apart. One of the other most well-known Exterminatus tools is virus bombing. Virus bombs unleash what is known as the Life Eater virus, and this will spread spread across the world extremely quickly, destroying all organic cellular structures it encounters. Virus bombs will envelop a world, reducing all organic matter to a thick sludge and gaseous state before an inevitable firestorm is triggered by the Imperial forces in orbit, again burning out the atmosphere of a planet. And while devastating, virus bombs are not a method of Exterminatus guaranteed to deliver 100% extermination. Any individuals sealed in high-grade enough underground bunkers or sealed environmental facilities may be protected and able to survive the virus. And once the atmosphere has been burned off by the orbiting ships, the planet will be devoid of life. It would be safe for survivors then to emerge, except of course that the planet will usually no longer then have an atmosphere, so they would need some suits to survive still. The most horrific and perhaps primary reason why virus bomb Exterminatus are deployed is primarily their speed. The virus bomb's virus, when unleashed, can envelop a planet and wipe out the entire population of billions in mere minutes. Exterminatus is one of the most extreme and powerful tools used by the Imperium of mankind, and it stands as a testament to humanity's resolve and unwavering determination to eradicate any threat to its security and power. Exterminatus will never be deployed lightly despite the rumours that have characterised it, and where it has been misused, the penalties are usually severe. Yet humanity and the Imperium will never flinch, never hesitate to deploy their ultimate weapon where necessary. It is the last line of defence against the Xenos and the darkness, and as regrettable as it may be, few ordinary citizens within the Imperium are likely even aware of the existence of Exterminatus. But even if they did, they would surely understand it to be a necessary sacrifice in order to safeguard the wider Imperium and human civilization. And then, as my final choice in this episode, we have the spirit of mankind. Now, I know, I can hear already everybody screaming, the spirit of man, Luton. Boo. Okay, fine. I can appreciate on the face of it, this seems like a weird non-choice. How can the spirit of man be a weapon? Or be insane, for that matter? Well, listen on and I'll tell you. Firstly, when I say consider the spirit of man to be one of...
It's going to be like similar to like chaos, like how chaos can be used as a weapon for the creatures in the void and stuff. Is it similar to that? Like, I feel like that's the only way it can be considered a weapon. Let's watch.
Not the most powerful weapons held by humanity, because it is this spirit which enables many of those insane things that happen within the Imperium, both against its enemies but also against itself, and that without this indomitable spirit of man, I would say it were debatable as to whether the Imperium could function well, or if in fact at all. I should say that of course within philosophy and religion there can be many different interpretations of what we might mean when talking about the human spirit. It can be seen as a tangibly positive or far more ambiguous thing. Either way, I'm no philosopher, but really what I'm thinking about when talking about the human spirit or the spirit of mankind is not some invisible element that makes us all individual or some ethereal sense of our personal selves, also our unique elements. I'm talking about the spirit of humanity as being far more impersonal and universal, a collective indestructible sense of determination which encompasses all. Essentially, the spirit of mankind being a binding force that is renewed and forever embedded by simple daily actions, be it imperial dogma of a religious nature or just plain devotion to the Imperium, as well as associated visual stimuli which surround citizens of the Imperium everywhere. Now, this sense of spirit is powerful in one person, but in a large fighting force it can grow within them, and it is this spirit that enables a human to go through literal hell whilst retaining the unbreakable belief that they know they themselves carry, not only the strength of the God Emperor within them, but that they may well be only one small individual, but serve a greater purpose in humanity in defense of the Imperium of mankind. In some respects, you may even liken this collective driving force to be not again entirely dissimilar to traits of the orcs, and it is much more...
I mean, it's basically like in real life, like people who are in the military and stuff and fight for, you know, the country and stuff, and like that spirit, that hope, dreams, you know, knowing that you're fighting for something, for someone, for your family, you know, for your country, you know, stuff like that. Like, it is a weapon in a way. It is a very strong weapon, because think about if people didn't have that. I mean, we wouldn't have, you know, nobody would want to join the army or the military or anything like that for any country like that. It's just that spirit we have, you know, as human beings, you know, we gotta we're fighting for something. This means something, you know. And same way in this universe, especially in this universe, you know, you have to have that spirit, you know. You have to have it. I mean, if I was born in this universe, if I have it too. But we're in the real world, and this shit is crazy. If you put me like right now to that universe, I'm shitting bricks. Like fuck this. Like I don't know if I want to fight the Tyrannid, like the bug creatures. Like fuck, I don't know if I want to fight them. But in this universe, they're about like the best option if you're gonna fight any fucking faction.
Than simply determination or a sense of duty. Those may be how people might frame it to themselves, but deeper down it is this spirit of humanity that all within the Imperium feel compelled to do whatever is necessary for the whole. It is this sense of spirit which also goes toward the core of 40K, that the Imperium is a bleak and dark parody. The clothes are everywhere. For example, at the beginning of many source material books for decades now, it states on page 1, quote, "To be a man in such times is to be one amongst untold billions. It is to live in the cruelest and most bloody regime imaginable." It goes on to state that this is a dark and terrible era where you'll find little comfort or hope, forget the power of technology and science, forget the promise of progress and advancement, forget any notion of common humanity or compassion. Now, the complete long statement to which that quote is a part of should never be removed from the first pages of these source books, because it is this which reflects what the Imperium truly is. Not the appalling horror seen in its wars, and not the nightmarish actions of its Inquisition or horrifying apathy of its bureaucratic administration. The Imperium as it stands is in many ways showcasing the worst of humanity, but also some of its best attributes. The darkest part lies in the fact that it need not actually be so. The Imperium in the 41st millennium had decayed so greatly as an empire that until very recently it could see no forward light and was only being kept functional by unrelenting and punishing brutality coupled with a vast anonymous bureaucracy. Now, if you were to look around the galaxy, the Imperium, it's true that you will find some areas which are not as brutal and harrowing as others. In fact, some systems are actually fairly stable and even enable citizens to live a degree of normality. Now, what this illustrates for us is the tragic parody that is the Imperium of mankind. In fact, this hopefully is a message that many people should have long realized, that when we talk about the bureaucracy and the horror within the Imperium, these sound very vague and impersonal, but that the underlying inescapable fact is that it is humanity that makes things in the Imperium so bad for itself. Betrayal, greed, vengeance, fear, ignorance, and many other of our worst attributes. And when combined with all the other events of the thousands of years before and after the heresy, it is humanity that has in many ways destroyed itself time and time again. This is perhaps why the AI from the Dark Age of technology, when they encounter humanity, absolutely despair, because they have just seen the horror which we unfold upon ourselves. Yet somehow we never manage to destroy ourselves completely. There is always this sense of resistance and human spirit that cannot be extinguished even amid all the horror, which leaves us grappling and dragging and hanging on by our fingernails. And this is the ongoing theme within 40K. But also, if for example you look at Chaos and the Warp is a very literal reflection of the worst aspects of humanity. And this explanation of the Warp is hardly subtle. In fact, it's glaringly obvious that humanity's greatest enemy in the galaxy, above all the Xenos threats, is in fact itself. Within the overall narrative of 40K, it's certainly no accident that within the Warp, the darkest parts of human psyche are given form and power to reach out and trigger a self-perpetuating downward spiral. The message is built in alphabet bricks that humanity is its own worst enemy, and it continually undermines its own positive steps forward. Hardly a groundbreaking realization, but it seemed important to note. Now, as you will hopefully have realized, I appreciate the madness and absurdity of 40K. I love it. But I also like to take 40K fairly seriously, and I approach a lot of things with a more literal interpretation. And this is because I enjoy thinking about it in those terms. I like thinking about the human condition and futurist rationalizations, and also of course just the narrative. I'll freely admit that sometimes I like to overthink things and make them more complicated than they really are. But
that's okay. I do the same thing.
The Imperium, if we take just a small step back and see things from a broader perspective, the overall message about humanity working against itself and how farcical that is are very easy to see. Anyway, this might have sounded like I'm going wildly off topic here, but I'm not. The point that I was trying to illustrate is that it's not the Imperium as some faceless organization which creates humanity's bleak and harrowing reality, but that it is the nature of humanity which has created the unending hellscape that is the Imperium, and this is largely enabled by what I consider to be the spirit of humanity. So how exactly then does this human spirit benefit mankind? It doesn't sound good at all. In fact, it sounds pretty bad. Well, certainly from one perspective that's fair to say, except for one thing, and this is debatable, but many believe the Imperium is the only organizational structure capable of defending and ruling over humanity, given the current threats and the predicaments it finds itself in. Not to mention, of course, the fact that the Emperor himself has become the god of mankind for the majority of humans, and so any other system is just unthinkable by default. So despite its faceless and appalling lack of empathy, the Imperium requires cooperation from humanity in order to function on a day-to-day level, as well as for its combat operations. And it may be a tragic and appalling situation, but it is this collective spirit of humanity which in part enables the Imperium to function and therefore has to a degree safeguarded human civilization for many thousands of years. Plus some superhuman genetically adapted warriors or something, but don't worry about those guys. The Imperium uses this impersonal but collective spirit which exists within all humans and further instills its citizens with the suffocating ideological perspectives of the Imperium of Man, as well as its other subsidiary organizations like the Ecclesiarchy, who continually and aggressively demand absolute devotion to the God Emperor. And this has formed, for all practical purposes, a near enough unbreakable belief within ordinary humans that their required actions are at the behest of what is basically an all-powerful God who watches over them. Also worth noting that compounding these views are the miraculous events and feats of legend which continue to occur within the Imperium. Additionally, given what we know of the emergence of psychers and the power of faith within the Imperium, it is questionable if you could relate on an even footing humans of the 41st millennium to those in our current age, even in simple terms of what it means to be a human and what stage of development they are at. And this is really a whole other topic, but to make it a simple aside, what I'm thinking about here is my belief that humans in the time of the Imperium are in some respects more advanced and developed than we are now. In others, they are horribly regressive, and that's all before we talk about their slowly emerging psychic powers. Human development in the age of the Imperium is one other factor that I consider in making this sense of human spirit such a powerful thing. Another aspect is that when it comes to miraculous events, these will rarely be questioned or doubted. The vast majority of citizens are going to receive information about almost anything rarely at a first-hand level, and certainly not in a visual format. It will more likely be passed on to them through dictated dogma and likely word of mouth. Perhaps they'll have some very limited printed word, or on advanced worlds maybe display screens throughout a hive city, but most people are going to live dirty, hard, monotonous lives. So when they may catch a glimpse or a story that helps illustrate to them the fleeting remains of glory within the Imperium, it must seem inspirational and spiritually uplifting for many ordinary citizens. So no wonder that they
basically
have
like real life, like
spiritual nature of things.
Now,
and there have of course been numerous incidents where human guardsmen survived encounters that no mortal should have been capable of, or who held their nerve and strength of will beyond that of even an Astartes, who for whatever reason have in fact shown themselves to be not nearly as unbreakable as we would so often be led to believe, whereas regular guardsmen time and time again demonstrate a sense of human spirit and character that demonstrates this unbreakable grit and determination. And how is this possible? How can such fragile mortal citizens become so dedicated, so determined and mentally unbreakable? Well, one might equally answer, how does an ordinary human become an Astartes, a Grey Knight, or a member of the Inquisition? And this is what I've been driving to get to. The Imperium's military forces are all that stands between humanity and complete extermination. And how were we able to create those that are able to endure and have such willpower even before the Imperium really existed? Physical strength will only ever carry you so far. It's well known that much human endurance is achieved in the mind, and this is no different for those who serve the Imperium or aspire to join the ranks of its most powerful warriors. It is the human spirit that enables this, and to my mind, this is how the spirit of humanity humanity is both something that can be quite insane and also one of our most powerful weapons. And I've often considered how some, and I want to emphasize only some, Astartes with their near immortal nature, even knowing they're destined to die in battle, can develop something akin to a fear of their inevitable end, and this may be where you see some turn to becoming renegade marines. Yet Astartes who lead near enough immortal lives comparative to those ordinary humans who live and breathe their mortal nature, who understand their time is fleeting, but know collectively the human spirit endures, that even when they leave, something remains which cannot be extinguished as a part of the whole. Human citizens of the Imperium are seemingly more accepting of their mortality than perhaps Astartes, who we also know can be prone via their ascension to become somewhat detached from their humanity and even their view of ordinary humans. Some chapters of Astartes will be very considerate and protective of ordinary humans, but others may actually become apathetic to a point where they are actually walking a very fine line between treachery and loyalty. Despite all of the factional infighting and devastating problems that the Imperium continues to bear, this sense of human spirit remains a defining characteristic of humanity, ever present yet also intangible, something that cultivates a sense of necessary sacrifice essential for the Imperium to function, a strength and understanding that drives forward humanity with unrelenting determination, even when its forces face the most forlorn of battles upon those ruined worlds that are little more than ashen wastes. Yet for as much as it can be a powerful positive, it also enables some of the worst aspects of humanity, especially within the Imperium. The scale of losses and the insane disregard for human life only made possible because of the enduring spirit and loyalty. It is one of humanity's most passive traits, but also one which allows the forces of mankind to be so proactively aggressive that it has embedded this sense of necessary sacrifice in its culture. All Imperial citizens know that mankind can never be completely defeated, that no matter the odds or the enemy, they know to their core humanity shall always rise above, break free from and ultimately destroy its enemies. Should it require 100,000, 10 million, 100 million, 10 billion human lives, so be it. The Imperium of mankind and the Emperor cannot be defeated, they cannot fall, or all will be lost. The Imperium wields powerful, world-ending weaponry, has achieved superhuman genetic advances, deploys titanic machines of war that shake the ground like an earthquake, and fire weapons that can break planets themselves. Yet above it all sits one of the most powerful weapons for humanity in the galaxy of the 41st millennium, the indomitable spirit of mankind. It is simply the greatest tragedy that most citizens within the Imperium are seemingly unable to realize that this spirit can be used in other ways to drag themselves out from the horror and build a more constructive way forward with less internal suffering, but retaining all the strengths and benefits of the Imperium structure, and that perhaps this had in fact been the Emperor's original intentions before everything became mired in darkness and mythology, to a point where now humanity has drifted so far backward into stagnant ignorance that its empire can only be enforced through harrowing brutality. With that said, it's equally possible that without the human spirit enabling its determination and unity, it's unlikely that the Imperium will be capable of wielding its armies in the hundreds of millions who march relentlessly to their deaths, knowing they do what simply must be done for the greater glory and survival of humanity, and most importantly, in the service of the Holy Emperor and the Imperium of mankind. There is perhaps no better example than that of Cadia and the unbreakable will of the Astra Militarum. The dark forces of chaos may have had their technical victory, but despite literally breaking apart the planet of Cadia, they could not break the spirit of mankind. So now I just want to talk briefly about Audible and why I think it is an excellent service for you to use. Many of you guys continue to tell me that you use this service and why it is so good, and I've included your comments as I always do here on the screen so you can see for yourself why it is a great service. You can start today with a 30-day Audible trial, 1 free audiobook and unlimited monthly Audible.
Another good video. Another good video. He's very good at what he does. There's a few things that I really, got from this. And like the Imperium, our strongest weapon is our emotion, or not our emotions, well, kind of our emotions, but their emotions, and their what's what I'm looking for, and that's their strongest weapon, and it's also like, or their biggest weakness. You get what I'm saying? Like, it's like a double-edged sword. They have all the spirit, just like in real life. They have all the spirit and everything, but like he talked about, like the last video with chaos, like sometimes our emotions and stuff, yes, it's good, makes us strong, it makes them strong, but can also get them in a lot of trouble too. It's crazy. And more and more I learn, like I always say, more and more I learn about this universe. I just don't understand, like, why doesn't this universe have more, or like in different mediums? I understand, like, it's a very, very dark universe, but they can make a movie kind of like, let's go back, kind of like Aliens. They can make a movie like that with the Imperium and the Tyranid and stuff. That'd be awesome. They can make a movie like The Terminator. That would be freaking awesome too. Make a show kind of similar to like Game of Thrones, I guess. It's just so much. Yes, I understand it's a dark universe, but there's so much they can do with it. We just need more movies, shows, games. It's just right there, and I know it would be so big if they get the right people to do it. You need the right director, writers, producers, all that. Who actually, I mean, there's probably plenty of people out there who like this universe. I mean, the only big name, pretty sure there's more, but the only big name I can think of, one actor, Henry Cavill. But there has to be more than that. Like, come on. Like, this universe is just so rich. It's so fucking rich. But anyways, we can talk about that some other day. Give him a like, give him a like, subscribe to him. I'm already subscribed. Yeah, we can probably look at some comments if you want for a second. I don't want to make this video too long. It's already long enough. So we'll look at a couple. Luthen? How do you say his name? Am I saying his name right? Probably not. Luthen apologizes for rambling me. Well, shit, that's the reason I'm here. That's half of the reason I'm here. That guy's not wrong. I mean, that person isn't wrong. Most powerful weapon in the Imperium is the old abs of the... Okay, yeah, I guess so. I definitely agree with this person. Like, one reason I'm here. Ramble on, teach me something. I want to know more. But yeah, with that said, maybe one day he's talking about Audible. Like, one day maybe I can get a subscription, broke little person, and I would not mind listening to books about this universe at all. On my free time, just listen. Put in some headphones or put it on the computer and just listen. Especially if I'm playing some games or something. I would love that. But yeah, I'm broke. Can't really do that now. Like I said, leave him a like, subscribe to him. He's already bigger than me, but anyways, just do it. I would like to say before I go, like I said in the last video, I'm gonna try to play Space Marines 2. I'm gonna try it as soon as possible. I do get some money a few days before the game comes out, so cross my fingers. I will get it. I don't know if I should say this or not, but if you want to help, my Cash App and PayPal, I don't know if they're in the description, but they're on my page. I might put them in the description. I don't know. Y'all really don't need to help me out like that, but if you want to support me a little bit to make more content, play more games, get my opinions on games and other stuff, and that, you can help me out if you want to. I'm not gonna, beg you or anything like that. But anyways, leave me a like, subscribe, and ring that bell for more videos, and I'll see you next time. Peace.